GMA Health Clinics, excuse me, Dr. Martin and Dr. Jones, and they're going to share a little bit of information with us. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, etc., please leave those in the comments section of this Facebook Live, and we will try to get those answered for you today. If there are questions we can't answer during this video, we'll try to follow up as quickly as we can with answers to those in the comments section. We really appreciate Dr. Jones and Dr. Martin for being here with us today. And we know that you guys are busy right now and trying to stay on top of a lot of information in a very, very fast, at a very fast pace. So thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us today and share some information. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and just ask for a quick update on some of the updates on testing. Is it widely available now or more available now? So kind of give us an update on that. Do you mind, Dr. Jones?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having us. This is a weird time, and I've done more stuff on, computers and talking to people than I really thought I would ever do as a family doctor. So I just want to thank, you guys, the board, for making sure that people are communicated with and giving us this format. So thank you.
Absolutely.
The testing is going well. We were talking about this in our doctor's meeting yesterday. We've not run out of tests yet, but we always feel like we're that close to running out of tests. And so it's like every week we get in another small batch, or now we've got a new way to test with a little, prick from the finger and some drops of blood. So things are coming out that give us more options, and so that's helpful. It's still hard to get supplies quickly, but they always seem to come at just the right time. So, one of the questions that I sometimes get asked is testing widely available? And I would answer yes. I think testing in Young County is widely available. I don't know anywhere, do you, Dr. Martin, about anywhere that practices medicine that you can't get a COVID-19 test this afternoon. I think everywhere right now can do it. Now, if we have a rush, we may run out in a few days. So it's not like we have a room full of supplies where we can just keep grabbing from for hundreds and hundreds of patients. But right now we're able to meet demand. And I think we've tested over 300 patients in the county. Many of those patients have been tested on multiple occasions because they were a positive test that needed to be followed up on, or maybe they were initial tests, but we thought we better get another one in a few days just to be on the safe side. And so, 300 tests is probably, that's how many people we've done, but it's been, more tests done than that because some people are duplicated.
But you don't have you guys aren't experiencing like a waiting list right now for people who need tests, but you just don't have them.
No, we don't. We have our drive-through respiratory clinic open, and our nurse just walked by outside the window here just a minute ago, waving at us, to go run some tests and or to get them packaged up to send to Austin for the COVID-19 testing. So, we're going. I know the other places in town are going. I talked to Shane Cornell at the hospital this morning just to kind of see where they were at, and they've got supplies. None of us are, like I said, we can't test everybody in Young County in the next week. We don't have that many tests.
Right.
The people that we need to be testing right now, the people that are exposed, the people that have symptoms, we can get them tested.
Excellent. What about the programs to offset cost? Do you know anything about that for the insured or uninsured?
The only thing I know that I've heard about that, and correct me if you've heard something different, Dr. Martin, but I hear about that on the news, and I read about that on Facebook, like from the White House or the governor. I have no earthly idea how that's supposed to happen.
Okay.
Now, I think maybe they're alluding a little bit to insurances are being required to cover that cost. And maybe that's part of whenever they say this is going to be free, it means if you've got Blue Cross HMO, that Blue Cross HMO is going to pay the lab for that test. They're not going to make you, the patient, pay for it. But where do you go to get a free test? I don't know. We send ours. I'm pretty certain that every Young County facility is all sending them to a lab in Austin. CPL is a very good reference lab. We've used them for a couple of years for a lot of our in-office reference testing. And They come through 7 days a week. They drive it to Fort Worth. They fly it from Meacham down to Austin, and they run our test first thing the next morning. That process has been a lot faster. We understand from taking it to a CDC lab. Maybe you can get it done cheaper at a CDC facility, but my cousin lives in Denver and she has COVID-19. She's been sick for 26 days or so with it. And she waited 5 days to get her test results. And it was probably because, Denver's a big place. They've got a big problem. And I bet they were doing hers at a CDC facility. And, that's just kind of what you get. We're pretty fortunate in Lamb to have these, ways, channels of getting things taken care of already in place. And, labs like CPL have worked with us extremely well on this.
It's great. Yeah, that turnaround time is really impressive. And I'll say also, I drove by on Saturday and saw that drive through and people were in it, taking advantage of it. And I said, that is really cool. I mean, that is neat. You guys did it quickly, set it up. I mean, just responded to that need. And I think it's really impressive that y'all were able to do that and make that available for the community. So thank you also for that. We appreciate it. Okay, so what about, this is always a question that we get, so I'm going to throw it out there. But what about any new treatment options?
So the three treatment options that I'm aware of are still hydroxychloroquine, which is, what we use to prophylax for people going to Africa on mission trips so they don't get malaria. We also use that. It's commonly called Plaquenil. That's its common brand name. And people with rheumatoid arthritis or lupus will take that. That in combination with a Z-Pak, which can be given intravenously if somebody's really sick in the hospital, has kind of been the crux of treatment in the US. Now, there's also enough people out there that have had the illness, who have antibodies in their bloodstream, that they're able to donate plasma, and then antibodies are being taken from that plasma. It's called convalescent plasma, which means it's plasma that's rich in antibodies from a person who recently survived that COVID-19 illness. And so given those antibodies through an IV infusion to a really sick patient is another method that's being used.
So is that something that you think will be used here in Young County?
I hope not. Is that the right?
I mean, if needed, I guess, obviously we don't want that need to arise, but if it does, is that something that would be available to a patient?
When we look at the medical literature, the places that that's being used and the settings that that's being used in is in the ICUs with the sickest of the sick patients. Okay. There's not a lot of it out there. It's being done the right way. I've looked into this lately, and because we wonder, hopefully and I think we'll get into this later, Chris. We hope now that Texas has done such a good job of flattening that curve that Graham's not going to be stuck with a dozen ICU patients and us trying to decide who gets, to be on the ventilator. That was an early fear, and with mitigation, we hope that maybe we don't get there now, but maybe we end up with enough patients who are producing antibodies, whose convalescent plasma maybe could be harvested here in Graham. And so we're kind of looking at maybe we could be maybe set up something with Carter so we could have a little local place where people who have had the illness could donate their plasma. So that's excellent. The way that we're able to maybe benefit the urban areas with the big ICUs with our experience and resources.
That is excellent. Go ahead, Dr. Martin.
A couple other treatments I think that they're looking at. One's Resindavir, which is a HIV medication that's shown some promise. I think there's some studies going on in New York on that. And then I just read last night they're looking at ivermectin, which is a medicine we use to treat certain parasitic infections, and that has shown some promise too. So there's some things out there. None of them have been well studied yet, so they're all kind of experimental right now.
Right. Do you think that we will see a vaccine in the next, few months, year, maybe? I know that's a hard question to answer, but I know that that's something that people are wondering.
I'll go with maybe.
Hopefully.
I think we're looking at probably a year away, from everything that I've read. I think there are some vaccine studies that are going on, but it's very hard to get those approved. It takes a long time to make sure they're safe.
And for good reason, I would assume, to make sure that they're safe and there aren't side effects we don't know about and all of that. Understandable that it takes a long time, but of course we're all hoping and praying that that's what we see, in the near future, hopefully.
When you look at the way these illnesses come about, these viruses, especially respiratory viruses, they tend to come seasonally. Could we have one for next winter? That's my hope, but it's probably going to be like 2021. I think it's going to take a lot of providence from the good Lord above for us to have something by this October or November. But could we have something for that next winter? I think that's promising.
Something to hope for, anyway, for sure. Pray and hope and cross your fingers and whatever else makes you feel lucky. But so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. And Dr. Martin, you have definitely played a key role in our community, and both of you do, by the way. But Dr. Martin, you are now also our county health official, and so I know you had a lot of influence and involvement when it came to the shelter-in-place recommendations. So do you think that we are, and Dr. Jones did touch on this, but do you think that we are seeing positive results from that shelter-in-place?
Definitely seeing results in Graham and in Texas in general. And when you look at the shelter-in-place, the goal there is to slow how fast this virus spreads. We're not going to stop it from coming to Graham. It's going to come to Graham, it's going to come to Texas, but we want it to come slowly. And if you compare Wuhan, China, the rate of new cases per day was doubling. It was doubling every 24 hours for a while, then it was every 2 days for a long time. And then when you look at New York, the rate of doubling of new cases was every 2 to 3 days. And when you look at Texas right now, the rate of doubling of new cases is every 7 to 8 days. And so what that does for Texas is lets us take care of the people that are sick. And like Dr. Jones is saying, instead of Dr. Jones and I managing a critically ill patient that we're not normally doing, those type of patients are in the biggest hospitals where they have the people that are used to doing that kind of care and where they have plenty of nurses and doctors to help them. There's some other numbers that I think are important to look at when you think about this. And you hear a lot about the fatality rate, and that's what the news talks about a lot, is the fatality rate. The fatality rate is calculated by the number of deaths divided by the total cases. And that number, I think, is very flawed because it includes a lot of people that are still sick and you don't know what their outcome is going to be. A better number is called the death rate. The death rate is calculated by the number of deaths divided by the number of completed cases. So the number of people who've either died or survived the illness and are now past it. And when you look at those numbers, the worldwide death rate for this illness is 21%. There's been 127,000 people that have died and 606,000 total people that have either died or got through and survived. And when you look at the New York death rate right now, using those same type of numbers, it's 37%, which is extremely scary. And when you look at the Texas death rate right now, it is 10%. So we've had approximately 300 deaths in Texas and 2,700 people that have made it through the illness and survived. And so when you do those numbers, it's about a 10% death rate in Texas. So that's a tremendous difference from New York to Texas. Those numbers will change. One variable on those numbers is that we don't know how many people have had this illness and not been diagnosed, which might make the death rate considerably lower. There may be lots of people out there who've had it and had it over the last month or so and not gotten very sick with it. And so once we're capable of doing more broad testing, we'll be able to know that information. So I think the shelter in place has helped lower the death rate, number one. Number two, it's not just the healthcare workers. We talk about the healthcare workers getting overwhelmed, but what happens in a city like Graham or a city like Dallas if you get half the police force infected at one time? Because a lot of people don't die from this illness, but they get very sick and they get sick for a long time. Some of them, like Dr. Jones mentioned, sick for 21 days, 28 days. And if you start knocking out the people who help maintain our power plant, or you knock out half the teachers in town at one time, or half the police force or the whole fire department. It could be devastating in ways that don't even, those aren't even going to figure in this type of a death rate of the virus, but they're going to create a lot of problems too. And then the third reason why I think the shelter in place is important is every day that we delay getting a large number of cases here, we're that much closer to a vaccine or to having some of these studies on these new medications result. It gives us a better idea of how to treat people. So I know the shelter in place has been very painful, but I do think it has helped.
Excellent. And I know you guys are so aware of this, but of course, being Chamber of Commerce, we're seeing, of course, the economic impact of a shelter in place. And that is, it is hard. I don't want to, we empathize, and I know you all do too. And I know you feel the economic impact as well. So I think a lot of people think that doctors' offices are immune to that economic impact, or for some reason right now, you guys are just, raking in the dough, so to speak, because this is a health crisis, a pandemic. But I know you guys are feeling it as well. But would you say, and I'm not going to ask you to repeat this exact, but can you kind of just break down that cost of, of hurting our economy, essentially, is that a necessary cost to the benefit of keeping people, lowering that death rate, lowering that spread? Is that necessary from your perspective?
To a point it is. And I know it's extremely hard. I know people right now are fighting to keep their homes, to keep their businesses, and the country as a whole is going into huge, massive debt right now. And doctors' offices are struggling as much as anyone. We're all taking out loans, trying to maintain our payroll and all of those type of things. And those numbers are very quantifiable. So it's very hard to look at those trillions of dollars that we're spending and try to justify it. And but then you look at the number of people that have died in other countries and how fast it's happened. And you look at the numbers that we have in Texas right now, and you have to say that without the things we're doing, there would be a large number of people that would be dead right now that are not dead. And it's hard to put a price tag on that. It's hard to say how much is every life worth, how much do we spend to save one life, but we've saved a lot of lives, and so I think it's justifiable, at least for now.
Yeah. Now the question is the juice worth the squeeze? And how long do you squeeze for may be kind of the next question. And, I'm anxious to see what our governor's going to tell us tomorrow, or what's coming for the state of Texas. I am very thankful that I live in Texas, and I'm very thankful that I live in Graham, Texas. Like a lot of you out there, I live here because this is where I want to be. It's where I want to raise my family. And there are a lot of unique things about this community that make us all very proud of it and want to hold on to it. And one of the things that I'm proudest of is how quickly as a community we were able to enact things like, let's talk to all the ministers in the community and in the area, and let's get church services suspended. So many elderly in these buildings that get together. In one case going in there, it has been devastating early on in this. Guys, if you look back, we had our case zero how many weeks ago, Pat?
3 weeks.
3 weeks now. And to my knowledge, that extended to one other human being in Young County. And that happened because things were already in place. Everybody was already aware. That guy knew to call his doctor really quickly. And everybody that was around him the days before that ended up testing negative. It's amazing to me that we were able to do that here. And it only happened because we had the courage to do it. Just imagine if we didn't get that test done that Sunday afternoon, and there wasn't a quarantine of that individual. And he went for a week around talking to people. Where would we be today? I think we would have a full hospital with sick people, and we would have shipped out people to bigger ICUs at a rate that we haven't had to experience. And so, when you look back, was this effective? Absolutely. Now, I read some stuff from epidemiologists and these infectious disease gurus, and it's interesting to me to see that when this thing gets into your area, the first thing you have to do is like just calm it down. Shut everything down that you can, which is what we've done pretty much for the month of April here. And then you're able to go back in and selectively, and I read the term to surgically reopen and reinstate things after it can be studied and looked at it. And I think that's what the governor's going to bring us tomorrow, is a plan for how we can move forward into May and then the summertime that, number one, does not make every one of our grandmas at high risk of dying before Christmas, because none of us want that. But all of us also understand that we can do things like make sure we stay 6 feet apart, that we keep our hands clean, that we don't hug and shake hands in public. We can do a lot of those things that help continue to mitigate this. And so, I think the juice has been worth the squeeze, and I'm so proud that we've done it. And moving forward, it's just going to have to be in a logical, well-studied, scientifically driven way. I think it's going to happen. I think there's science behind it from what I've read.
And I think that, I've shared this story before, but I'm just going to say it again because I just found it so impactful personally. So I want to share it as much as I can. But I've been so inspired by some of our local retailers here who are really feeling that pain and really struggling right now. And I have cried on the phone with them, and I have cried on a Zoom meeting with them, and I feel their pain, and it has been really hard. And one of them said to me, this is my livelihood, and I've put everything into this business, and I love my business and I love my customers. But at the end of the day, if me sacrificing for a while saves one life, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. This is life and death. It's not about money. It's not about, income. It's not about livelihood even. This is about life and death. And if that's my sacrifice, if that's my part in this that I need to play, then so be it. I'm willing to do it. And it just really was moving to me because I think that we're all struggling a little bit with sacrificing right now, and sacrificing our norms, sacrificing our social gatherings, sacrificing, birthdays. My daughter's 15th birthday is today, and we woke her up this morning with a Zoom call with her friends to say happy birthday, because that's really the best we can do right now. And it is what it is. But sacrificing funerals, that is really, really challenging. So we're all sacrificing right now in a different way. But I just found it so inspiring to hear somebody say, hey, somebody's life is more important than this, and it's a hard thing to pull yourself back from and see, but it is life and death. And I think you guys have done a really good job of keeping us updated and keeping us informed on that. One of the other things I wanted to ask about, because Dr. Jones, I've heard you talk about this before, and it was also really impactful for me. I think at the beginning of this whole situation, I really, probably like most people, at least I'm going to assume, had the mentality and attitude of, oh, good grief, it's a virus, whatever, we'll be fine. We've dealt with the flu forever. We'll be fine. No big deal. Somebody asked me if I was going to cancel the March luncheon. And I said, what? No, why would we do that? No, of course we're not going to cancel anything. What? And I heard you speak, Dr. Jones, and I went, oh man, I have not stayed informed. I am not informed. And this is a lot more serious than I realized. Can you just share a little bit of what you talked about that day about the healthcare system and how important it is for us to protect that system overall?
2 days before that meeting over at the Graham Regional Medical Center, I did not understand this at all. A light bulb had gone off in Dr. Martin's head, and he has since described this to me as, it's like if you're a doctor or if you're a science person, and once that light bulb goes off and you see what this virus is and what it does to populations, like you can't turn it off. Like it's always there, and it's just something that you have to deal with. And that light bulb went off for me on Saturday morning before we had our meeting on Monday. And part of what was my breakthrough to understand and have that light bulb moment was a couple of articles that I read. One of them was a really good article by a guy named Kevin MD, who does a blog regularly that I like to follow. But the one that was the most impactful to me was a Newsweek journalist had sat down in an ICU with a physician in Italy and did like this little 3-page interview. And the interview was basically just everything was in quotes from this physician. And he in that talked about, that morning he had 3 people in the ICU that were all 40. They were all men. One of them was, just kind of Joe Blow that didn't have a job. And the other one was a pretty big wig executive. And the other one was a blue collar worker who had a wife and 2 daughters at home. And he had been caring for these guys for a few days, and they had all come to the point of needing a ventilator at the same time. And he had 1 open ventilator in his ICU. And so that morning he had to choose. I'm sorry if I get emotional, but I've been in situations like that with trauma. When you work at big hospitals like John Peter Smith and down in Bexar County and San Antonio, you go through things that you don't want to have to do again. And I've walked into places where there were, mass shootings, and we could only fit so many people to operate on because there were just so many rooms available. And so you have to triage those people as to who's just going to lay there and die and who you're going to go try to save. And I don't want to do that. And I dang sure don't want to do that in Graham, Texas. And that's why I spoke the way I did at that meeting on Monday, passionately, because guys, you don't want to see that happen. And this doctor, who's one of my colleagues that I've never met, but he's a brother in arms in a lot of ways, he was bearing a burden that's not meant to be laid on him. And Italy has taken it hard, and you can name all kinds of reasons why, but what he said was, my country didn't take this seriously. And we needed to take it seriously. Look back from what was being forecasted for Texas then, and look at where we are today. Thank God that our civic leaders, made the hard decision so that we could be in a position where, as we roll into summer, we have some optimism about this. And we don't have bodies literally stacked up in ice coolers out behind a hospital, because that's happening in hospitals in America that didn't roll out protective measures soon enough. And so I'm thankful that we did it. That's why this became such a passion to me. I want to credit all of this to Dr. Martin, who saw this way before we all did. And he just kept beating the drum until we saw it. And so thank you, Pat, for understanding this and help guiding us through it, because without that, I don't know that we would be in such a strong position in Young County as we are today.
Well, and I think that one of the things, after you shared that story, we had some discussion a few weeks ago. And one of the things that I mentioned, and I've kind of continued to say throughout all of this, is that, while this is completely unprecedented, it definitely blindsided all of our industries, all of our leaders. We also did have some hindsight benefit because we watched some other countries go through this first. And so, I remember literally saying, but hopefully America can get it right. We can do the right things at the right time and be bold and courageous about taking some massive steps, some great sacrifices to not be in that situation. And when it got to the US, I said, well, hopefully Texas can get it right. Hopefully we can be that leader that says, hey, this is going to be tough. It's going to be hard. We're going to sacrifice and we're going to get through it. But we're definitely going to be bold about our decisions, because right now, this is a time for courageous leadership, not a time to be scared and to do what's right, to protect people's health. And then at some point I said, but come on, Young County, even if Texas won't do it. And of course they did. But But I just think it does speak volumes for our city leaders, our county leaders, our state leaders, that they were willing. I think I don't think many people understand the burden that creates for a leader, a government leader, because obviously our economy is foundational, and nobody ever wants to disrupt that or impact that negatively. And nobody ever wants to create a situation where you have people's livelihoods at risk, or people needing unemployment, that otherwise wouldn't have. That's a scary and horrible feeling for anyone. But but I'm so proud that our leaders here and our leaders in Texas saw that there was a greater need. The risk was too large not to make that sacrifice. And I think that's something to be said for where we live and how fortunate we are to be where we are. So I also want to just ask a few questions that we've had. Some of these we might have covered a little bit, but what about for people who are needing to renew annual medications and need their annual physical? Are they still able to make an appointment and come in and do that with you all?
Yes.
Okay.
Our clinic is open. We are doing most of our visits on it's called the televisit. So we're calling the patient, we're getting them on the camera and talking to them that way. If it's something that we need to see in person, like something we need to feel or poke on, then we are bringing them in. We're doing it very safely. We're having people wait out in their car until we're ready for them. They're coming straight back. And so we're trying to continue to see patients, but do it as safely as possible. And I think it's very safe the way we're doing it. When we're drawing lab, there's no more than one person at a time getting blood drawn. There's not a big group of people waiting. There's nobody waiting. So the answer is yes. People still can get medicines, and we can still do checkups.
Can I just add, please call for your appointment. Part of keeping that economy going, I mean, we're down to a quarter of what we normally do monthly. And you can just imagine what that does on a big medical practices budget. So, if you've got an appointment coming up in April or May, plan on keeping it. The nurses are going to call you and convert that to a telehealth visit so that you can do it at home like we're doing this interview.
Yeah. In fact, I have my telehealth appointment scheduled with Dr. Martin tomorrow. You may not even know that, Dr. Martin, but I do. They called me yesterday. So, but yeah, I think, and being able to do that telehealth, those appointments, that is also really just shows how flexible and adaptive I think that you guys have been, and really all of our clinics. I think a lot of them are doing that, and that's really impressive. And I know our hospital has also been really impacted. I think that's something that people maybe aren't aware of, but this has not been good for the hospital overall financially, and they've done a great job on preparing and taking those necessary steps and sacrificing. But this is not good for them. This is not good for the hospital either. So I think maybe it's good for us to be aware of that as citizens. That's our hospital. We need to be aware that this is taking a toll on the hospital as well, but that they're taking those necessary sacrifices. We're taking those necessary sacrifices so that we can, again, keep that curve flat, hopefully. We also had a question about, if a vaccine is approved, would it be recommended for everyone or only for the immune compromised?
Yeah.
I think once we have a good, safe vaccine, I think it'll be recommended for everyone. But I could see there might be a point where a vaccine comes out and maybe the FDA approves it early for certain individuals. I could see something like that happening too. So I think the goal is to get a vaccine that would work on everyone as soon as we can.
For sure. It seems like maybe that would be based on availability, I guess, of the vaccine, how quickly it can be produced, et cetera. But also, probably my favorite comment is from the one and only Christy Jones, who says that now juice is worth the squeeze is her new catchphrase. And then comments, he's a little country, y'all. Because we all need a good spouse to call us out, Oh, that's great. One other, somebody asked about Rand Paul who never had symptoms, and that is something that we're seeing, right? That sometimes people can have this virus and show no symptoms or really minor symptoms.
Yeah, yeah. So we have that's absolutely right, and that's so important for us to know is how many people might have had this that we don't know about, because then all the death rate numbers that we talked about, if we have a whole lot of people that had this and we don't know it, then those numbers would look a lot better. We do not think that people have been having this for months and months. You know, there's been questions like that too. Hey, I was sick back in October. I think I've already had this. Well, that's very unlikely because we weren't seeing this. We weren't seeing this in Texas until just the last, probably 6 weeks would be the earliest someone could have had it. But there is a new test out that will test immunoglobulins, and so that can tell somebody if they've had this before or not. And that will be a very important test going forward to try to find out who has had it and who hasn't had it. And probably once there's enough of those tests, there'll probably be a recommendation from the government to get everyone tested for that, so we can find out exactly how many people are immune. Because if the key to opening things back up is to having some herd immunity so that our system's not overwhelmed. We're going to have this virus for a long time, but once we have a little bit of herd immunity, once we have a group of people that are immune to it, it's not just going to fly through a community like it would right now.
And I heard, I think it was just yesterday that they saw somebody test positive again after they had tested negative. Or I guess we're worried maybe that there sometimes is not immunity. And so people can get it more than once. Have you guys heard anything about that?
That's a great. They're doing some studies now. I read one study in South Korea where they had, I think, 90 people that had tested positive after testing negative before. It really didn't go into a lot of detail about how sick those people were, and so I don't know if that's a reinfection or if it's a reemergence of the same infection. Dr. Jones and I were talking about this yesterday. He said, kind of like mono sometimes will come and go, and maybe this virus is something like that. I think a lot more research will need to go into that. Could also be new. Could there be a new strain of the virus? That's something everybody's very afraid of. If a virus can mutate very quickly, then it becomes really hard to get vaccines for. But I think right now they don't think that. Most people are not getting it again. That's a very small number of people that happen to. And what the article didn't go into is whether those people were really sick or were they just testing? Were they part of a study where they're just retesting? So.
We also have, I think we're getting a petition campaign started right now to make sure that teachers are the first ones offered the vaccine, so that all of us working parents are not homeschooling anymore as soon as possible.
Amen.
Seriously. That's an industry we will never take for granted, right? I think everybody's on the same page with that one. Okay, and then one more question. Somebody asked why we aren't offering testing to everyone, and I think you guys covered that a little bit, but can you just kind of recap that again?
We would love to test everybody, and maybe with supplies as they catch up, we'll be able to do that in a few weeks. Do you think maybe?
Yeah, we're hoping that we would like to test everyone.
Yeah. Sometimes we get calls and it'll be, I went to an outside emergency room or somewhere, it doesn't matter where. And they told me I didn't have enough symptoms to be tested. We have not taken that approach here. We feel like if we've got one more test and we've got somebody who has a symptom that sounds like it could be, it's on us to find out if they do or don't. And so we're gonna test them if we feel like they could be a person to transmit this to our community. So we've probably been more aggressive about testing here than other areas around this North Texas region have. But it protects us as a small community with limited resources to try to use those in a front-loaded fashion. That's how we found case zero early. And that's how we were able to mitigate some spread that could have happened in our community that may have a different landscape today. So, yeah, great question. Our goal is to test everybody as soon as we can. Right now, we're sticking to people that have symptoms or exposures.
And it seems like, there could be, I guess, the argument that holding on, storing as, excuse me, storing as many of those tests to have on hand if there is just a massive outbreak. Maybe that's one way to look at it. But, excuse me. But I'm really proud of the approach that maybe we can mitigate that before we get to that point. And obviously that's ideal. Let's keep people from getting that sick and having that massive outbreak so that we don't need to have all of those tests stored up like that.
Well, in Krisa, we heard from speaking to physicians that we know who are in big hospitals in metroplex type areas. They don't test them at some point. They get to the point where they just go, oh, I know that's COVID. You don't even need to swab them. So they don't need them at some point. We do that during our big flu season. We can peek in a room, and we've done this long enough. You can know with about 90-something% certainty that that's a case of influenza. I've seen it all week long. It gets that way with COVID-19. So that rationale of, let's hoard that stuff for the outbreak, that doesn't really play out in real life in real hospitals.
Yeah, that makes sense that testing would be most important when you don't have the big outbreak, so that you are trying to contain it and quarantine people and all of that. That's when you need to know the most on who has it.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, what about the 15-minute test? Do you guys know anything about that? And do you know when it will be available? Or if it will be available?
We have a test right now that's a 10 to 20-minute test, and it's a blood test. You get a few drops of blood, and that tells you if you have the immunoglobulins to that disease. So it's IgG and IgM. We have a very limited number of those tests right now. I think there's also a test that they call the 15-minute test that's from Abbott, and that's a test that our hospital will be capable of running when they can get supplies of it. But the supplies so far for that test have gone to New York, basically.
Makes sense. Excellent. Okay, what about, is this virus transmitted via mosquito or any other insect, animal, etc.? Or is it just, human to human, surface, etc.?
That's a great question. There's been a lot of studies on that. There have been at least a couple of cases where the virus has been transmitted to a dog. There's been 0 cases where a dog has transmitted to a person. And that's 2 cases out of, now 2 million cases of this virus. So I think it's would be extremely unlikely for you to transmit it to your animal. But if you're sick, you should probably not sleep with your dog. Your dog cannot transmit it to you. We have no evidence of pets being able to transmit this to people. Where this virus came from is, still a huge question. Initially, they thought it came from bats. Then they thought it came from an animal called a pangolin in a wet market, which is a market where they kind of maintain live animals and then slaughter them and give them to people, and that was in China. Then there's thoughts that it could have come from there's a lab in Wuhan, China, where they test coronaviruses, and so could this be an accidental release from the lab or something like that? So that this virus came from an animal, probably from eating it, but there's no evidence at this point that you can catch it from an animal, or that we have to be worried about catching it from cats or dogs. Mosquitoes is another question, and I think that what I read about that is it's very unlikely that a mosquito could transmit this illness. And I can't remember the details of that article, but I did read an article specifically on that, and they felt like it would be extremely unlikely for a mosquito to be able to transmit this.
And has anything changed regarding how it is transmitted as far as, I think one of you put something out not too long ago about, surfaces in the air, all of that, but has anything changed regarding how people can, contract it from someone else? I don't know what the medical way to say that is.
I think the spread is from you touching something and then touching your face. That's the absolute number one way it's caught. And so that's why it's so important to wash your hands. You can pick it up from surfaces. We know that on certain surfaces it can live for even days at a time. What we don't know is, can you actually get infected from that? So just because the lab guy can come in and culture it off a tabletop 2 days later, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you came and ate on that tabletop that you would catch it. But it's fair at this point. We know little enough about this to assume you could catch it from anything, and to anything you're touching, you should assume could have this virus, and you should clean it. And anytime you've touched something from outside your home, you should wash your hands. Anything coming into your home from outside your home, you should try to clean it the best you can, and put it away fast, like grocery bags or anything like that. You should assume it could carry the virus, because the real answer to that is we don't know for sure.
Okay. And the ways that we wash our hands, of course, soap and water, and then we can use antibacterial sanitizer. And what is the alcohol percentage that the antibacterial sanitizer needs to have?
It's got
50% alcohol base for those hand sanitizers. And there are a lot of people making, home remedy type of hand sanitizers. Solaris Hospice brought by a whole bunch of them a few weeks ago for the clinic, and we were super proud to get those. They've got a good formula, so people are being pretty resourceful, and I think it's important. I don't know that people really understand how important the hand washing is, but I mean, just think of how many times per day you've caught yourself touching your face lately. And, I can't believe that I haven't done it yet during this interview, but I'm pretty sure I haven't. My wife will tell me for sure if I did.
I'm going back to rewatch it.
But it's difficult to not do that. And it's impossible for your hands to be clean all the time. So people are thinking, well, maybe I can wear some gloves and circumvent that whole thing. Well, the gloves just become your skin. And so anything then that your gloves touch, it's not like the gloves are magic. They protect your skin. So the second that if you have washed hands and you put them into gloves, and the gloves were clean when you picked them up, meaning that the person before you who pulled the glove out didn't have a germ on their hands, then you have put on gloves that are clean. As soon as you touch something, your gloves are no longer clean. The second you take your gloves off and touch something, your hands are. So the most important thing, it's way more important than gloves, is wash your hands and use the hand sanitizers.
And what about masks?
My mom in Abilene brought me down a big old box worth of masks today that we pass out to patients that are coming in for lab work and x-rays, those kind of things that we don't feel like they need to wait to have done. Dr. Martin and I, really all the docs here, completely concur with what you're seeing on the news about wear a mask. My thinking on the mask is if I put on a mask, I'm protecting everybody around me for when I cough, clear my throat, sneeze, or sometimes when I talk, I'll spit a little bit. And, it's important to not be spreading that stuff around. That's the droplet that probably has the virus that gets on somebody else's hands, so that when they scratch their nose, they get sick. So I like the mask. How much they protect the mask wearer from the environment around them, I don't know that it's that huge. And I think that's why the people on TV and the WHO weren't really quick to recommend wearing a mask, because it's pretty limited studies to show that wearing a mask protects you, the wearer, from all of the people around you. This is a good citizen type of thing in my book.
And wearing the mask might remind people not to touch their face. If you got that mask on, maybe you think, maybe when you start scratching your nose, you're like, oh yeah, I got a mask on.
Mm-hmm. My quick funny story, my 8-year-old Owen was on a Google Hangout with his classmates, and so they're all talking, the video, they had video on and everything, and all of a sudden, Owen interrupts everybody and says, excuse me, Mrs. Markham, I just saw you touch your face. So don't you worry, he's just ready to call anyone out for touching their face.
That's funny. Well, and the thing about the mask, reminding us not to touch our faces, I know when I wear a mask, it moves, and I'm constantly fighting the urge to adjust it just a little bit or get it back up on my nose. It's a new world, new challenges.
For sure. Well, oh, wait, no, I have another one. Is there a chance that the shelter in place will lift on May the 1st?
I think that that's up to the governor, and I think that's an extremely hard decision. I think parts of it will lift. Don't you? I kind of get the impression that, like Dr. Jones said, more of a surgical approach of, hey, we're going to kind of shut down this area right now, and it may be a rotating shutdown. Like Young County might be shut down 4 weeks from now, but not right now, or maybe we'll get lucky and won't be shut down again. So I think that parts of it will lift.
I think there's probably, we're not politicians, so don't nobody hold us to any of this, but we probably feel like there's 0% chance that on May the 5th, everything opens up and goes back to just the way it was a couple of months ago. And I think I am horrified that if like anybody's thinking that that's really going to happen who's in a position to vote on that, because that would reopen, you know, the whole new curve issue would become a brand new topic all again. But by lifting things appropriately, by doing contact tracing, and you can go Google what that is. Contact tracing is a very sophisticated way of finding people who were found to have the virus and who could they have exposed. And let's get those people quarantined and tested so that we can help really, with a great deal of effort, slow continued spread through communities while allowing communities to start to interact with each other again. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next couple of weeks brings. I think, like Dr. Martin said, that we're going to see things loosen. But if we get little flare-ups here and there, what you got to do is, it's like a fire. And you remember the droughts that we had years ago. You'd have a fire. They were across the street from our house one day, and you know, you just got to go out there and drop everything on it and just stop it. And then you can back off a little. There's bulldozers and helicopters were dropping water on it. And you had 4 fire trucks, and you just do everything to contain that. And then you come back later, and you have a little flare-ups here and there, and those can be dealt with. But it's going to be a kind of an evolving thing as, once again, as we go through the next few months. But I'm optimistic that we can do this in an economically sensitive way so that people don't just lose their rear ends and we're, you know, all bankrupt at the end of this virus. But if we did nothing, we're all going to be bankrupt at the end of the virus anyway, because everyone's going to have been so sick that we're scared to death to walk out of our doors. And that may last for months or years if we have what they had in Italy. So
I think that's a really good point too, because I think a lot of what we're starting to talk about and see is kind of our new normal, you know, moving forward. And that's scary. It's scary for everyone. But things are always changing, and we have to be aware of that and adapt. And so I think to some degree, we may not shop the same way overall. We may not learn the same way overall. We may not, you know, I think there will be some changes long term to the way we conduct normal everyday business.
I agree. Absolutely.
Okay, one more question for you, then I promise I'll let you guys go because I know you're busy. But what about when someone does receive a positive test, if they do not have a permanent residence or somewhere where they can safely quarantine, do they have any options for quarantining elsewhere? So if they are homeless, let's say.
That's a great. I think we will. I think if that happens, we'll have to come up with a place to quarantine them. Absolutely, and we would ask for help from probably the local authorities to help us come up with a place. But
I've seen that sort of thing in years past with other things. Like occasionally we'll see tuberculosis still, and I remember a case, my God, like a decade ago, and it was a similar situation that, and the TDH actually made arrangements for a place, and it was, you know, I don't even remember, maybe it was an apartment that they had that they kind of keep on hold for a situation like that. So the TDH and local authorities would probably just have to get together to sort that out, but it would definitely be dealt with.
We definitely would quarantine that individual. We wouldn't just leave them on the streets.
Okay, good. I think I was made aware of a situation this morning, somebody in the Metroplex that is in that exact situation and really doesn't know where to go. They were turned away at the shelter because they've tested positive, but they don't have anywhere to go. So kind of a scary situation, somebody sleeping on the streets, literally, with a positive COVID result. So I like that we're already thinking about that we know that we'll take care of that should the situation arise here in Young County or in Graham.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you. Sorry I kept you guys so long. We obviously wanted to extract a lot of information today. So thank you very much for sharing with us. Anything else that you guys want to touch on or leave us with?
Gloves. Masks.
So my mom dropped off like 3 dozen of these, and they'll be out at the front door. If anybody would like to come by and pick one up, I know Dr. Martin mentioned this last week with the regular weekly update. So, but I've only got like 30 of these, and so they'll go fast. But anybody out there that's making these things, just share with everybody else that you are. We don't want to be like the repository for face masks, because we want to keep traffic coming through here low, because the people that are coming in our building for things are people that are probably at high risk. And so we're trying to mitigate that here. So we don't want to be like the place to drop off masks and everyone can come. Let's take care of that through social networking. If we can.
I know I was really impressed with what the First United Methodist Church did recently with a bunch of other churches. They partnered together and made so many masks, and I thought that was a really neat initiative.
Me too. We've had so many people that want to help, that are making masks, and Dana Dickey's been really instrumental in getting us some masks, and Brad Lesh has made masks, and a number of people working with those people making masks, and just a nice thing for our community to have people like that.
For sure. Isabel Smith, I think, really took that and ran with it and just, did such a great job. I think that's such a neat way to be able to do something positive and productive and help keep our community safe. So really proud of them as well. Well, thank you all so much. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. We want you to know that you have our support right now. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Krisa.
All right. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.